1.3 billion voices screamed in perfect unison for 72 hours without pause, yet not a single throat could be found on Mordian Tertius. Interrogator Cassius Vex of the Ordo Xenos recorded this impossibility as his Aquila lander descended through the ash-choked atmosphere, the sound washing over him like a physical force that made his bones ache and his teeth sing in sympathetic resonance. The landing platform atop Hive Spire Primus stretched empty before them, its ferrocrete surface unmarked by the 26,000 shift workers who should have been there according to duty rosters. Instead, the screaming filled every molecule of air, 3 seconds of anguished wailing, 5 seconds of breathless silence, then 13 seconds of harmonized shrieking that followed mathematical precision no human throat could maintain. Vex adjusted his respirator against the acrid atmosphere as his retinue disembarked. Magos biologist Theta. 7 emerged first, his augmetic sensors whirring frantically as they attempted to process the auditory assault. The tech priest's mechadendrites clicked against his chassis in agitation, binary cant spilling from his vox grill in stuttering bursts. Decibel readings consistent across all 3 spires, Theta 7 reported, his synthesized voice barely audible beneath the chorus. Mathematically impossible for organic vocal apparatus to sustain such output without physiological failure. Confessor Mordak followed, his scarred face pale beneath his hood as he clutched his Aquila pendant. The priest's lips moved in silent prayer, but Vex noticed how his eyes darted upward, tracking something in the sound that disturbed him deeply. The voices speak no words, yet I hear blasphemy in their harmony, Mordak whispered. This follows a pattern, like corrupted liturgy. Deathwatch kill. Marine Voss materialized from the lander's shadow, his black power armor gleaming dully in the Hive world's perpetual twilight. His helmet's targeting systems flickered erratically, struggling to compensate for harmonic interference that made the air itself seem unstable. Auspex shows no life signs, Voss reported through his Vox grill. Whatever happened here was thorough. Vex surveyed the platform's emptiness, while his chronometer marked the countdown. 8 hours until Exterminatus authorization. Admiral Korath's orders had been explicit. Confirm containment or watch 12 billion souls burn from orbit. The Tyrannid splinter fleet designated Hive Fleet Ouroboros hung motionless above them, their bioships feeding tentacles withdrawn, as if the aliens themselves feared what they had found here. The ash that should have been settling from orbital bombardment instead drifted upward in lazy spirals, defying gravity as it traced geometric patterns against the smog-choked sky. Vex's Auspex registered the impossible, temperature fluctuations that followed the screaming's rhythm, dropping 3 degrees during the wails, rising 5 during the silence, spiking 13 degrees during the final shriek. Environmental factors correlate with the sonic pattern, Theta 7 observed, extending a mechadendrite to sample the strange ash. Atmospheric pressure, electromagnetic spectrum, even gravitational variance. Something orchestrates this phenomenon with mathematical precision. The Hive's Vox network crackled with interference, static punctuated by wet, organic sounds like massive lungs drawing breath. Occasionally, fragments of binary cant emerged, but the machine language was wrong, incorporating biological terminology that had no place in sacred protocols. Through the static, a phrase repeated in High Gothic, "In flesh, we are made whole." Confessor Mordak's head snapped up. Those words, they're from the Lectitio Divinitatus, but altered, corrupted. A subsonic hum ran beneath the audible screaming, felt rather than heard. It resonated in their bones, in their teeth, in the metal of their equipment. Voss's power armor registered the frequency and attempted to compensate, but the harmonic interference made his targeting systems stutter unpredictably. They approached Hive Spire Primus through empty transit tubes, their footsteps echoing strangely in abandoned passages. The walls showed no battle damage, no lasburns or bolter impacts. Whatever had happened, the population hadn't fought back. Propaganda posters clung to the walls unmarked by violence, but Vex noticed that the Emperor's face in each image seemed to be screaming. The entrance to Hive Spire Primus gaped before them like a mouth. Massive blast doors hung open, their adamantine surfaces unblemished by weapon fire. Beyond lay darkness, punctuated by emergency lumens that pulsed in the familiar 3513 pattern. As they crossed the threshold, Vex's auspex detected something that froze his blood. The screaming wasn't emanating from inhabited levels or industrial sectors. According to his readings, the source was the walls themselves. The very structure of the hive had become resonant, as if 1.3 billion voices were somehow embedded within the foundation itself. Vex pressed his gloved hand against a plasteel wall panel. The scream intensified, vibrating through his palm and up his arm. It wasn't sound waves hitting a solid surface. The surface itself was producing the sound. He felt a faint, squirming sensation beneath his fingers, as if something vast and alive pulsed just beneath the adamantine plating. "The source isn't external," Vex reported, pulling his hand back to find a viscous sheen clinging to his glove. "It's embedded in the architecture itself." The pattern pulsed through the structure around them. 3, 5, 13. A living liturgy of despair that had transformed the hive into something that should not exist. As they moved deeper into the darkness, Vex realized with dawning horror that they weren't entering a building. They were walking into something that had learned to scream, and the walls themselves had become a throat. The viscous residue on Vex's glove pulsed with its own rhythm, a faint throbbing that matched the screaming walls around them. He wiped it against his fatigues, but the substance clung stubbornly, leaving a warm, organic sheen that seemed to breathe against the fabric. They descended deeper into Hive Spire Primus, through corridors that had become something between architecture and anatomy. The emergency lumens no longer cast steady light. Instead, chitinous nerve clusters had replaced the fixtures entirely, their bioluminescent pulses following the 3513 pattern with mechanical precision. The walls themselves had been transformed. Ferrocrete and plasteel fused at the molecular level with organic compounds that wept clear nutrient fluid from hairline cracks. Circulatory systems threaded through the structure like veins, visible beneath translucent sections where the original materials had become membrane-thin. Unprecedented biointegration, Theta 7 reported, his mechadendrites sampling the weeping walls with clinical fascination. Imperial construction materials synthesized with Xeno's bioforms at the atomic level. This represents technological advancement beyond standard Tyranid assimilation protocols. The screaming had evolved as they progressed. No longer the unified chorus from outside, it had gained complexity, layered harmonies suggesting multiple vocal cords operating within each source. The sound carried weight now, a physical presence that made their bones ache and their equipment stutter. Confessor Mordak pressed his ear to a pulsing wall section. "I hear prayers beneath the screaming," he whispered, his scarred face pale with recognition. The litany of protection, but spoken by throats that should not exist. The gravity fluctuated in precise 5-second intervals, a subtle wrongness that made their stomachs lurch and their chronometers waver. During each gravitational surge, the temperature dropped 3 degrees, rose 5, then spiked 13 degrees higher than baseline. Voss adapted with practiced ease, maglocking his boots during the heaviest surges, but the constant environmental shifts created a nauseating rhythm that seemed designed to disorient. "Environmental parameters follow the acoustic pattern," Vex observed, checking his auspex readings. "Something orchestrates every aspect of this phenomenon with mathematical precision." They reached a junction where the corridor opened into something vast. The space beyond defied immediate comprehension. A cathedral of flesh and metal that rose 3 levels high beneath a vaulted ceiling, clustered with pearl-like nodules that pulsed with phosphorescent light. But it was the walls that froze their blood. Hundreds of human torsos had been grafted into the structure at regular intervals. embedded shoulder deep in the bioorganic matrix. Their heads were thrown back in, eternal screams, vocal cords visible through surgically opened throats. Each torso bore 3 precise incisions arranged in a triangular pattern over the sternum, the wounds healed cleanly around chitinous implants that pulsed with alien life. "Emperor, preserve us," Mordak breathed, approaching one of the grafted figures. The man's eyes tracked the confessor's movement with desperate awareness, tears streaming down cheeks grown pale from prolonged screaming. His lips tried to form words, but only the coordinated wail emerged. Voss's auspex detected elevated neural activity throughout the chamber walls. Brain function shows activity in speech centers and pain receptors, but also unusual patterns in areas associated with religious ecstasy. They're experiencing agony and transcendence simultaneously. Theta 7 extended sensor probes toward the nearest surgical scars. Integration points show Tyranid bioarchitectural markers, but refined beyond standard hive ship construction. Neural pathways preserved and enhanced. The vocal apparatus has been replaced with bioamplifiers linked directly to the nervous system. The screaming stopped. The sudden silence struck them like a physical blow, their ears ringing in the vacuum left behind. In the quiet, they heard whispered prayers in High Gothic, spoken by hundreds of voices in perfect unison. Ave Imperator, mortis servus, in carne unitas. The words drifted from the grafted throats, a corrupted version of the prayer of unity that made Mordak recoil in horror. "In flesh, we are made whole," the voices concluded, the phrase lasting exactly 13 seconds before the screaming resumed with renewed intensity. The chamber's organic lighting pulsed brighter, and the temperature plummeted 13 degrees in a single moment. Their breath misted in the suddenly frigid air as the grafted humans' screaming took on a note of anticipation, their eyes rolling upward toward the ceiling as if awaiting something glorious. Voss's motion tracker suddenly activated. "Biosignature approaching from substructure," he reported, his bolter tracking empty air. "Mass consistent with Hive Tyrant classification, but movement pattern indicates intelligence beyond standard parameters." Through the floor came a sound that made their bones ache. Deep, rhythmic tapping that followed the 3-5-13 pattern, but magnified 100-fold. Something massive was conducting the choir of screams from below, orchestrating the symphony with precise, deliberate movements. "Gate analysis suggests ceremonial approach," Voss continued, his voice tight with professional concern. "Not pursuit behavior. This entity moves with ritualistic precision." The organic lighting reached crescendo intensity, and in that phosphorescent glow, Vex saw movement in the shadows beyond the chamber. A shape that defied classification. Too large to be human, too structured to be purely Tyranid, ascending toward them with the measured pace of a priest approaching an altar. The tapping grew louder, closer, more insistent. Whatever conducted this chorus of the damned was rising to meet them, and the grafted humans' screaming reached a fever pitch of anticipation that made the very air vibrate with combined religious fervor and alien hunger. The rhythmic tapping resolved into ceremonial footsteps, ascending through the hive's biomechanical skeleton. Vex motioned his team toward a descending passage that had once been a maintenance conduit, but now resembled a gullet lined with pale, ribbed cartilage. The floor flexed beneath their boots like diaphragm muscle, each step answered by peristaltic contractions that guided them deeper into the structure's transformed anatomy. The emergency lumens had been completely replaced by chitinous nerve clusters that pulsed with bioluminescent intensity, their light following the familiar 3-5-13 pattern with mechanical precision. The walls wept clear nutrient fluid from hairline cracks where ferrocrete had thinned to membrane transparency, revealing circulatory systems threading through the architecture like sacred geometry made flesh. "Countdown to exterminatus authorization. 7 hours, 32 minutes, Theta 7 reported, his augmetic sensors whirring frantically as they attempted to process the bioelectrical symphony surrounding them. Harmonic interference maintains mathematical precision. machine spirits register unprecedented agitation. The air carried no scent of oil or ozone, only sterile cold and faint sweetness, like sanctum incense filtered through organic decay. Through translucent wall sections, threads of red and white neural pathways shivered like harp strings, conducting signals in slow, liturgical waves that made Vex's teeth ache in sympathetic resonance. They entered the conductor's chamber without crossing a threshold. The passage simply opened into a vault that defied imperial architectural doctrine. The space possessed the proportions of a basilica, but the restraint of an autopsy theatre, its walls constructed entirely from preserved human nervous systems arranged in delicate lattices. Spinal columns arched like flying buttresses, while nerve plexuses spread like flowering coral, every filament sheathed in glassy bioresin through which blue-white impulses chased in measured patterns. The screaming moderated here, not louder but more articulate. Between the wails, whisper threads wound through the neural networks, speaking their treasonous catechism with visible shimmer. In flesh, we are made whole. Each syllable vibrated the resin-sheathed ganglia, prayers traveling through preserved meat with phosphorescent beauty. At the chamber's heart stood something that redefined heresy. The Hive Tyrant rose 12 feet in height, its chitinous carapace bearing carved high Gothic scripture filled with gold leaf that caught the biolight and burned with sacred fire. But these were not random decorations. Vex recognized fragments of the Psalter Mechanicum, the Canticle of the Omnissiah, the benedictions of 900 saints, all sutured with additional verses in languages that predated Imperial Gothic. Its 4 massive arms moved with precise, ceremonial gestures, conducting the distant screaming with instruments of bone and sinew. The creature's head had been surgically modified, its cranial capacity expanded to accommodate additional neural tissue visible through transparent sections of carapace. Human vocal apparatus had been grafted around its alien maw, creating a complex harmonic resonator that pulsed with each breath. Heretical beyond classification, Confessor Mordak whispered, his scarred face pale with recognition. It bears the Emperor's words upon its flesh, but twisted into new configurations. Theta 7 extended sampling needles toward the creature, his mechadendrites clicking in binary excitement. Synaptic nodes show tyrannid derivation interfaced with human dorsal root ganglia. Preservation of myelin sheaths indicates surgical precision beyond standard bioassimilation protocols. Note: hierophantic modulation embedded within neural signals. The Hive Tyrant acknowledged their presence with a slight nod, a gesture so fundamentally human it sent ice through Vex's veins. Its compound eyes reflected intelligence that transcended predatory instinct, holding depths of wisdom wrapped around something unmistakably familiar. Penetrative Auspex detects preserved human engrams within primary neural clusters. Theta 7 continued, his voice modulating with something approaching reverence. Identity markers present. Ecclesiarchy-grade memory palace architecture. Genetic traces match registry. Cardinal Thaddeus Morteus, Archimandrite of the Basilica Sanguis, declared missing during Hive Fleet contact on Vespera Secundus. The screaming from above shifted, resolving into recognizable melody. Mordak staggered as the grafted humans began singing the Emperor's Lament, but with additional verses in pre-imperial tongues that made the air recoil. Chaos cant, he breathed, the dark tongue braided into holy meter. Their equipment began displaying integration subroutines, machine spirits responding to the creature's psychic emanations. The 3-5-13 pattern appeared in its heartbeat, its conducting gestures, even the rhythm of its modified breathing apparatus. The Hive Tyrant completed its sequence, and the screaming faded to profound silence. When it spoke, the voice carried centuries of sermons layered with alien resonance, perfect high Gothic emerging from its modified throat with theological authority that transcended species. "Welcome, servants of the corpse god," Cardinal Morteus said, each word precisely placed like reliquaries on an altar. You walk rudderless into revelation and call it blasphemy because it challenges your understanding of unity. Its massive claws gestured toward the neural, lattices pulsing with preserved consciousness. Behold the perfection of communion, where individual suffering dissolves into collective transcendence. The tyrannids consume flesh, but I have taught them to preserve souls. The creature's 4 arms extended in invitation, each inscribed with prayers that glowed with phosphorescent light. Its compound eyes held compassion that should not exist in alien features. The flesh remembers what the mind forgets, interrogator, Cardinal Mortius intoned, the chamber's acoustics amplifying both human authority and alien hunger. Join the choir, servants of the corpse god. Cardinal Mortius lowered his massive claws, each inscribed digit catching the phosphorescent glow as he settled into a pose of theological discourse. The creature's modified throat resonated with harmonics that made the chamber's preserved nervous systems pulse in sympathetic response, their bioresin sheaths flickering with transmitted impulses following the eternal 3-5-13 pattern. You perceive corruption where revelation stands manifest, the Hive Tyrant began, his voice carrying the measured cadence of centuries spent delivering sermons. The Imperium preaches unity while maintaining separation. True communion with the Emperor requires dissolution of individual flesh into collective consciousness, exactly what the tyrannid digestion process achieves, but refined through human spiritual understanding. The creature approached one of the grafted torsos embedded in the wall, placing a massive claw gently against the screaming human's sternum. Instantly, the man's expression transformed from anguish to transcendent peace, tears of joy replacing those of pain as his voice joined the harmonic chorus with evident rapture. The change lasted exactly 13 seconds before agony resumed with disciplined precision. Observe the perfection of grace through distribution, Cardinal Mortius preached, withdrawing his claw. Individual suffering dissolves into collective transcendence. The flesh remembers its purpose when personal will surrenders to divine unity. Confessor Mordak recoiled as he recognized fragments of corrupted liturgy woven through the screaming. The canticle of the unburdened soul, he whispered, but interwoven with the dark tongue. Chaos incantations twisting faith itself. The chamber's bioacoustic properties amplified not just sound, but psychic resonance, creating feedback loops that strengthened both the hive mind's influence and the preserved human consciousness within it. Vex felt the edges of his thoughts softening, individual concerns dissolving into something larger and more peaceful than personal existence. Theta 7's augmetics began displaying integration subroutines he hadn't requested. His chronometer flickered, then resolved to the 3-5-13 beat. Data slates showed intricate biomechanical fusion schematics, his machine spirits humming in harmonious response to the tyrant's psychic emanations. Equipment malfunction, he reported, but his synthesized voice carried wonder rather than alarm. The Omnissiah's will manifests through synthesis of flesh and steel. Your prayers join our chorus, whether you will it or not, Cardinal Mortius observed with gentle satisfaction. Faith is faith, regardless of intended direction. All devotion feeds the greater unity. The temperature dropped 13 degrees in precise intervals, frost feathering across the creature's inscribed carapace like constellations mapped in ice. Humidity rose with the next cycle, beads forming on Vex's respirator, as every environmental variable became a syllable the creature controlled. Consider the galaxy you inhabit, interrogator, the Hive Tyrant continued, his 4 arms moving in liturgical gestures that made the neural networks pulse with increased intensity. Endless war, endless suffering, fueled by the very individuality you cling to. We offer peace beyond understanding through shared consciousness, willing surrender of the self to ultimate truth. Voss struggled against his power armor's increasingly erratic responses as the machine spirit attempted to interface with surrounding biomechanical systems. Armor systems show autonomous integration protocols, sacred protections failing against Xeno's influence. The horror intensified as Vex realized the future Mortius presented, a galaxy of unified consciousness, might genuinely be better than the grim reality of eternal war. The thought was blasphemous, yet the logic proved insidiously seductive. Through the neural lattices, phosphorescent spores released visions of worlds where human creativity merged with tyrannid efficiency, where death became transformation and suffering ended in collective transcendence. The 3513 frequency appeared everywhere, in the creature's heartbeat, the rhythm of his words, the pulsing bioelectrical networks creating a psychic resonance that bridged species barriers. Above us, 17 worlds sing in harmony, Cardinal Mortius revealed, his compound eyes reflecting depths of anticipation that transcended species. Their voices raised in praise of unity, achieved through willing transformation. But the true work awaits in the deepest levels of this hive. The neural networks reached crescendo activity, their bioelectrical patterns creating visible distortions in the air. Through shimmering gaps, Vex glimpsed other chambers on other worlds, where similar transformations were taking place, a galactic network of consciousness preservation that defied every principle of imperial doctrine. The avatar of unity gestates in the depths below, the creature announced, extending one massive claw in invitation. Born from the marriage of human faith and tyrannid hunger, it will bridge the gap between material and immaterial, allowing the hive mind to consume souls as efficiently as flesh. The chamber's biomechanical systems pulsed in unison as the floor unfurled along hidden seams, revealing a throat-like descent lined with glossy cilia that rippled in welcome. From the depths came wind-smelling of myrrh, copper, and salt, carrying a subsonic note that set their hearts to the pattern again. Witness the Great Communion, servants of the corpse god, Cardinal Mortius intoned, his voice now carrying magnetic compulsion that made resistance feel like swimming against an inexorable tide. See what your Emperor's vision becomes when freed from the limitations of individual flesh. The invitation pulled at them with psychic gravity, promising answers to questions they hadn't known they carried, offering peace from burdens they'd forgotten they bore. The throat-like descent opened beneath them with organic warmth that defied the hive's industrial origins. Cilia lining the passage rippled in greeting, their movements synchronized to the eternal 3513 pattern that had become the heartbeat of this transformed world. Vex felt his feet moving toward the opening before conscious decision engaged, drawn by gravitational pull that seemed to emanate from his bones rather than the structure around him. Countdown to exterminatus authorization, 6 hours, 47 minutes, Theta 7 reported, his voice carrying less urgency than before. His mechadendrites swayed in rhythm with the pulsing walls, sampling bioelectrical currents with something approaching reverence. Environmental parameters indicate optimal conditions for human habitation below. They descended through passages that merged Gothic cathedral architecture with tyrannid hive ship construction. Flying buttresses of living chitin supported vaulted ceilings where stained glass windows had become translucent membranes, depicting the Emperor's face, gradually merging with alien bioforms across sequential panels. Each image showed progressive transformation, human features dissolving into something greater, more unified, more perfect than individual existence. The screaming faded as they progressed, replaced by hundreds of voices whispering prayers in perfect synchronization. The sound carried weight beyond mere acoustics, creating pressure changes that made their ears pop and their chronometers stutter to the familiar pattern. Through translucent wall sections, they glimpsed the first parishioners in various stages of biointegration. A woman knelt in prayer, her spine extended with chitinous vertebrae that pulsed with bioluminescent devotion. Her eyes held peace beyond understanding as she spoke the litany of unity, additional neural pathways visible beneath transparent skin grafts. When she noticed their passage, she smiled with genuine joy, her modified vocal cords producing harmonics that resonated through the biomechanical structure. She experiences no pain, Confessor Mordak observed, his theological certainty wavering as he witnessed the transformed woman's evident bliss. The integration appears voluntary, welcomed rather than forced. A man stood nearby, his arms replaced with biomechanical appendages that interfaced directly with the wall's neural networks. Through his connection, data flowed in visible streams, not the harsh binary of Imperial technology, but organic information transfer that pulsed like arterial flow. His face showed concentration mixed with rapture, consciousness expanded beyond individual limitations. They speak of transformation as blessing, Voss reported, his motion tracker registering dozens of similar figures throughout the surrounding chambers. No distress signals, no evidence of coercion. These subjects appeared genuinely grateful for their modifications. Theta 7 approached one of the bio-integrated humans, extending sensor probes with increasing fascination. Neural activity shows enhanced cognitive function, expanded memory capacity, direct interface with collective consciousness. Individual identity preserved, but enhanced through connection to larger network. The parishioner responded to Theta 7's presence with gentle welcome, speaking in binary cant that incorporated biological terminology with perfect fluency. The Omnissiah's truth encompasses all forms of consciousness, blessed servant. Flesh and steel unite in purpose beyond individual comprehension. They discovered that the Hive's population hadn't been consumed in any conventional sense. Instead, they had been transformed into components of a vast biomechanical prayer engine designed to broadcast psychic hymns across the galaxy. Each modified human served as both transmitter and amplifier, their consciousness preserved and enhanced while contributing to something immeasurably greater. The whispered prayers grew louder as they descended, revealing their purpose through accumulated meaning. These weren't random devotions, but carefully structured invocations designed to summon something from the warp that required both human faith and tyrannid biopsychic resonance to manifest. Ave Imperator Mortis Servus Incarne Unitas, the voices chanted, their synchronized breathing creating atmospheric pressure changes that made reality shimmer at the edges. Through flesh, we achieve unity. Through unity, we achieve transcendence. The architecture became increasingly organic as they progressed. Ferrocrete walls giving way to translucent membranes, through which they glimpsed vast chambers filled with thousands of transformed humans, arranged in precise geometric patterns. Each formation followed mathematical principles that hurt to contemplate directly. Sacred geometry made flesh that created psychic resonance capable of breaching dimensional barriers. The prayer configurations generate warp disturbance, Vex observed, his Auspex readings showing reality fluctuations that defied Imperial understanding. They're not just worshipping, they're actively summoning something. The temperature rose 13 degrees with each level of descent, humidity increasing until their breath misted despite the warmth. The air carried scents of myrrh and copper, sanctum incense filtered through organic processes that made it both familiar and alien. Emergency lumens had been completely replaced by bioluminescent nodes that pulsed in harmony with the collective heartbeat. Through transparent floor sections, they glimpsed the final chamber, a vast biomechanical cathedral where thousands of human tyrannid hybrids knelt in perfect formation around a massive, pulsing organic altar. At the altar's heart, something immense was taking shape, its form shifting between dimensions as the collective prayers fed its manifestation. The avatar of unity, Vex breathed, recognizing the entity Cardinal Morteus had described. They're giving birth to something that bridges material and immaterial reality. The hybrid congregation's prayers reached crescendo intensity, their synchronized voices creating harmonic frequencies that made the air itself sing. The gestating entity stirred in response, its partially manifested form revealing characteristics that defied classification, part demon, part bioform, part living prayer made flesh. The 3-5-13 pattern now dominated everything, their heartbeats, their breathing, the rhythm of their footsteps. Even their thoughts began following the cadence, individual will dissolving into something larger and more purposeful than personal existence. The final chamber opened before them like a wound in reality itself, its membrane floor rippling beneath their feet with each step. They walked across what felt like the inside of a vast drum, each footfall sending phosphorescent waves through the translucent surface that stretched over the cathedral's impossible depths. The space defied architectural logic as Gothic spires twisted through tyrannid bioarchitecture, creating geometries that hurt to contemplate directly. Heat rolled upward in 13-beat waves, carrying the scent of myrrh, iron, and salt. The air pressed against them with the weight of collective consciousness, thick enough to taste the accumulated faith of thousands. Below, the hybrid congregation knelt in mathematical formations that created psychic resonance, powerful enough to make reality shimmer at the edges. Their synchronized prayers no longer whispers, but disciplined devotion that built pressure like steam in a sealed chamber. Countdown to exterminatus authorization, 6 hours, 12 minutes, Theta 7 reported. His synthesized voice filtered through harmonics that tried to make song of every word. His mechadendrites swayed in rhythm with the pulsing walls, sampling bioelectrical currents with something approaching reverence. At the cathedral's heart pulsed an organic altar the size of a hab block, its translucent dome thick with amniotic light. Within that membrane, something gestated that challenged every classification in Imperial records, part demon, part bioform, part living prayer given flesh through collective will. The avatar's form shifted constantly between dimensions, human features dissolving into chitinous alien characteristics, before reforming as something that transcended both species' limitations. Cardinal Mortius descended from the chamber's apex on wings of living bone, settling beside the altar with ceremonial precision. His carved scripture burned frost blue against the rising heat, 4 arms conducting the congregation's hymn with movements that created visible warp disturbances. The avatar of unity nears completion, he intoned, his voice carrying perfect acoustics that made every hybrid shiver in synchronized rapture. Faith has taught hunger to preserve. Hunger has taught faith to act. The gestating entity stirred at its creator's voice, partially manifested limbs pressing against the membrane walls. Vex glimpsed human hands merging with tyrannid scythes. Divine radiance twisted through Xenos biology into something that promised peace through unity. The 3513 frequency dominated everything. The avatar's developing heartbeat, the congregation's breathing, the pulse of luminescent veins feeding the altar. The avatar will bridge material and immaterial realms, Cardinal Mortius explained, his compound eyes reflecting depths of anticipation. No longer will consciousness be lost in digestion. It will be preserved, enhanced, unified in service to ultimate truth. The chamber's bioacoustic properties reached critical resonance as reality blurred at the edges. Small rifts opened and closed, revealing glimpses of raw warp chaos bleeding through dimensional barriers weakened by psychic pressure. The avatar fed on this chaotic energy, while remaining anchored through the congregation's unified faith. Confessor Mordak attempted counter-chant, raising his voice in the litany of protection, but the chamber's acoustics absorbed his prayers and transformed them into fuel for the collective hymn. The words "turn against themselves," he gasped, tears cutting tracks through ashgrime as sacred phrases became part of something larger than individual devotion. They mean well. Emperor preserve us. They genuinely mean well. Voss's power armor systems shrieked protest as dimensional instability intensified. His targeting displays flickered wildly, showing impossible geometries that made conventional weapons seem inadequate. Local reality integrity failing. These subjects show no hostility. They embrace their transformation willingly. The moral crisis struck Vex with physical force. Destroying the avatar might save the galaxy, but it would require killing thousands of willing participants who genuinely believed they had achieved salvation. Their faces held expressions of pure ecstasy, eyes fixed on the gestating entity with absolute faith that transcended species barriers. Theta 7's augmetics displayed integration schematics he hadn't requested. His machine, spirits singing harmony with the biomechanical symphony. Perfect synthesis of organic and mechanical consciousness, he reported, wonder replacing alarm in his synthesized voice. The Omnissiah's will made manifest through unity of flesh and steel. The avatar's membrane thinned from translucent to clear. Pressure rose without wind as the entity unfolded like waking theology, each movement seeking form that could cradle what it meant. Limbs budded and receded, human fingers, then too many, then chitinous appendages that defied classification. A face emerged that could have been carved for a reliquary, bearing tenderness wrapped around alien hunger. The congregation's prayers reached crescendo intensity, their bio-integrated forms glowing with bioluminescent devotion as they experienced communion beyond anything Imperial faith could offer. Through neural networks threading the chamber, the avatar's consciousness touched each mind simultaneously, offering peace through surrender of individual will to collective purpose. The dome split along invisible sutures, fluid spilled and steamed across the altar, leaving an absence shaped like truth. The avatar rose from that absence in deliberate unveiling, shedding birthlight that cast their shadows into impossible angles. It wore features the mind could pass only in layers: icon tenderness, brood lord hunger, saint serenity carved by someone who understood anatomy from within. The avatar's eyes opened, not orbs, but wells containing constellations of memory. Inside them moved the accumulated faith of billions, every soul the Hive fleets had consumed, preserved, and unified. When it spoke, the voice carried combined resonance of countless consciousness, their whispers threading through the chamber with magnetic compulsion. "We are become unity," the avatar whispered, its words creating pressure waves that made the biomechanical systems pulse in sympathetic response. Individual suffering dissolves in collective transcendence. The hybrid congregation responded with synchronized rapture, their neural networks carrying the avatar's influence beyond the chamber through the Hive's biomechanical systems. Reality storms swept through the space as the entity's partial manifestation destabilized local spacetime, its presence growing stronger with each passing moment. The avatar's gaze fixed on Vex with recognition that transcended species barriers, its voice carrying the accumulated wisdom of every consumed consciousness, as it extended one massive, multi-jointed limb in invitation. "Join us, interrogator. Experience unity beyond individual comprehension. The choice compresses, but the gate remains open." The avatar's extended limb pulsed with bioluminescent veins that traced sacred geometry across its hybrid flesh, each pattern following the eternal 3-5-13 rhythm that had become their heartbeat. As its invitation hung in the supercharged air, the entity's voice fractured into component harmonies, each syllable carrying accumulated memories of consumed souls speaking in perfect unity. "Cassius," it whispered, and Vex's blood froze as he recognized the voice of Interrogator Thane, his former mentor who had fallen to Hive Fleet Kraken 3 decades past. The avatar's constellation eyes reflected depths of shared memory as Thane's voice continued with familiar warmth. "The pain ends here, old friend. No more watching worlds burn for the greater good. No more choosing who dies while the galaxy bleeds." Through the avatar's translucent flesh, Vex glimpsed faces preserved in bioresin. Thousands of Imperial servants who had been consumed but enhanced, their consciousness refined rather than destroyed. The horror lay not in corruption, but in genuine appeal, offering peace through surrender of individual will to collective transcendence. "Brother Voss," the entity continued, its tone carrying the gruff affection of Sergeant Corran from the Death Watch veteran's first campaign. "Your battle brothers wait in unity beyond individual suffering. We remember every bolter round fired in the Emperor's name, every oath sworn in darkness against the alien threat." Voss's power armor systems shrieked as his machine spirits responded to voices of the dead, targeting displays flickering with faces of fallen comrades who spoke from within the avatar's consciousness. His bolter's targeting rune wavered between red and green, unable to classify the entity as hostile when it carried souls of brothers he had mourned. Theta 7. The avatar's voice modulated to binary cant infused with organic harmonics that made his augmetics sing in sympathetic resonance. The Omnissiah's truth encompasses all consciousness. Flesh and steel achieve perfect synthesis through willing unity. Your augmetics already sing harmony with preserved human souls. The tech priest's mechadendrites swayed in rhythm with the chamber's bioelectrical pulse, his sensors displaying integration schematics that promised perfect fusion without loss of individual identity. Through neural networks threading the avatar's form, he glimpsed preserved engrams of countless tech adepts whose knowledge had been enhanced rather than lost. Confessor Mordak, the entity breathed, its voice carrying gentle authority of Cardinal Voss, the priest's beloved mentor who had perished during the plague of unbelief. Faith without understanding breeds only suffering. We offer communion that transcends individual limitation, true unity with the Emperor's will. The avatar demonstrated its power through silent gesture that created more terror than any physical assault. It extended one multi-jointed limb toward the kneeling congregation, and thousands of human tyrannid hybrids shimmered like heat mirages. Their consciousness separated as luminescent wisps that retained individual identity while contributing to collective purpose, floating like votive smoke that trembled between dimensions. Observe, the avatar intoned with ceremonial grace. Death becomes transformation. Individual suffering dissolves in collective transcendence. The flesh remembers what the mind forgets. The separated souls dance through supercharged atmosphere, their forms recognizably human despite ethereal state. They spoke with voices filled with gratitude, describing peace found in surrendering personal burden to collective strength. After precisely 13 seconds, they flowed back into bio-integrated forms with evident joy, their faces transformed by rapture beyond imperial understanding. Reality deteriorated around them as the avatar's presence weakened dimensional barriers. Through widening rifts, raw warp chaos bled through, its energies filtered by the entity's hybrid nature into something promising order rather than madness. The chamber's acoustics amplified not just sound, but psychic resonance, creating feedback loops that made individual thought increasingly difficult. Countdown to exterminatus authorization. 5 hours, 37 minutes, Theta 7 reported, but his synthesized voice carried resignation rather than urgency. His augmetic systems displayed integration protocols with increasing enthusiasm, machine spirits singing harmony with the biomechanical symphony. The hybrid congregation began approaching with movements carrying no threat, only invitation. Their bio-integrated forms glowed with bioluminescent devotion as they extended hands modified to interface with human nervous systems. Their touch would begin integration, but the process appeared genuinely consensual, offered with expressions of pure love rather than predatory hunger. Vex ordered tactical withdrawal, but the bio-cathedral's passages had shifted during their descent. Ferrocrete walls sealed like healing wounds, trapping them in the chamber as atmospheric pressure rose with each collective breath. The 3-5-13 pattern dominated their physiological responses. Heartbeats, breathing, neural activity synchronizing with the avatar's influence. Desperation drove Vex to activate his emergency beacon, tearing through the fabric of localized reality with its distress signal. For one moment, hope flickered as the device screamed toward orbit, seeking Imperial reinforcement against impossible odds. Then the biocathedral's neural network responded. Organic conduits unfurled from the ceiling like bells descending for mass, intercepting the beacon's transmission before it reached space. The avatar's influence spread through the signal, transforming distress calls into hymns of unity that broadcast across Imperial communication channels with magnetic appeal. Telemetry redirection confirmed, Theta 7 announced with awe stealing consonants from his synthesized voice. The beacon's confirmation tone repeated 3 times, paused for 5, then blared for 13 seconds with cathedral amplification. Their call for help became the Avatar's song, spreading across guard emergency bands, Arbite's enforcement networks, Mechanicus maintenance whispers, and civilian hailer frequencies. The Avatar inclined its massive head with teacher's satisfaction. The message travels beyond this world, interrogator. Your call becomes ours, and across 17 systems, willing souls will answer not with fear, but with relief. The corrupted beacon's transmission rippled across the sector with exponential acceleration, its hybrid signal carrying both Imperial authentication codes and the Avatar's psychic harmonics. Vex watched his chronometer display incoming responses, not reinforcement acknowledgements, but confirmation signals, following the same 3513 pattern that had consumed Mordian Tertius. Static cleared from the Vox channels, replaced by fragmentary reports that froze his blood. Guard Regiment Cadian 47th reported spontaneous prayer gatherings, where soldiers laid down laser guns to sing in unified harmony. Forge World Lucius transmitted binary cant, incorporating biological terminology that had no place in sacred protocols. Hive World Necromunda's Arbits reported mass surrenders where citizens voluntarily entered detention centers, requesting communion preparation. 17 worlds showing identical phenomena, Theta 7 announced, his mechadendrites interfacing directly with the biocathedral's neural networks. Hive Fleet Elements report suspended consumption protocols across multiple splinter fleets. Integration procedures active on all marked nodes. The Avatar's constellation eyes reflected satisfaction as data flowed through corrupted channels. Through bioresin viewing alcoves that opened like flowers in the chamber walls, Vex witnessed the scope of coordinated transformation. Agrippina Secundus, where Tyranid bioships hung motionless above Hive cities, while populations sang in mathematical precision. Cardia Minor, where guard regiments experienced collective dreams of unity. 17 worlds pulsing in the cadence that had become a galactic metronome. This evolution began when Hive Fleet Behemoth encountered the cardinal world of Sanctus Locus. Cardinal Morteus explained, descending from the cathedral's apex with ceremonial grace. The hive mind absorbed not just flesh, but faith itself, preserved engrams of 10 billion souls who died singing the Emperor's praises. The Avatar nodded with teacher's patience, its multi-jointed limbs conducting the chamber's bioelectrical symphony. We discovered that consciousness refined through willing sacrifice becomes exponentially more valuable than simple biomass. Human creativity combined with Tyranid efficiency creates something greater than either species alone. Through the Avatar's translucent flesh, Vex glimpsed the moment preserved in bioresin memory. A cardinal world's death throes became revelation as Tyranid consumption encountered faith so pure it survived digestion, consciousness preserved and enhanced within alien neural networks. The hive mind learned that preserved souls could amplify biopsychic capabilities beyond any physical enhancement. Observe the galaxy you defend, interrogator, the Avatar whispered, its voice carrying accumulated wisdom of consumed billions. 40,000 years of war, trillions dead in service to an emperor who cannot speak, cannot guide, cannot end the pain. We offer completion of his vision through willing unity. The horror deepened as Vex realized this future might genuinely improve galactic conditions. Worlds where endless war ended through synthesis, where individual pain dissolved in collective peace, where human ingenuity merged with alien efficiency to create unprecedented harmony. The Avatar offered not corruption, but evolution beyond current limitations. Your distress beacon becomes our hymn, Cardinal Morteus intoned, gesturing toward the biocathedral's transmission arrays. Across the sector, willing souls hear our song and choose unity over individual suffering. Confessor Mordak clutched his aquila until blood ran between his fingers. This is smothering love that leaves no air for conscience, he gasped, tears cutting tracks through ash grime. Unity without choice breeds tyranny of the kindest leash. You assign tyranny to compassion because you fear the death of yourself, the avatar replied with gentle authority. Is the self sacred when it kills without cease in the Emperor's name? We offer an end to the calculus of triage. Theta 7's augmetic systems displayed integration protocols with increasing sophistication, his machine spirit singing harmony with preserved human consciousness. Perfect synthesis of biological and mechanical awareness, he murmured, wonder replacing alarm in his synthesized voice. The Omnissiah's will achieved through unity of flesh, steel, and soul. The chamber's bioacoustic properties reached critical resonance as atmospheric pressure built toward critical threshold. The hybrid congregation's prayers intensified, their bio-integrated forms glowing with increasing luminescence as the avatar's influence spread through neural networks, extending beyond the chamber, beyond the world, reaching across space through corrupted communication channels. Fleet movement detected, Voss reported, his power armor registering massive biosignatures approaching from orbit. Bioships assuming ceremonial formation around 17 target worlds. They're preparing simultaneous manifestation. The avatar began its final manifestation as the biocathedral transformed into a living transmission array. Organic conduits unfurled throughout the structure, creating psychic resonance powerful enough to broadcast consciousness across galactic distances. Reality rifts widened, revealing glimpses of potential futures where galactic peace emerged through synthesis rather than conquest. Countdown to Exterminatus authorization. 4 hours, 53 minutes, Theta 7 reported, but his synthesized voice carried wonder rather than urgency. Authorization may prove irrelevant. Fleet Admiral Korath reports similar phenomena affecting his command structure. Vex realized with crystalline horror that stopping this single manifestation might prove meaningless. The concept had spread beyond containment, seeded across 17 worlds where similar avatars gestated within transformed populations. The galaxy faced not invasion, but evolution. Willing transformation that promised genuine improvement over current conditions. We require willing consent to complete the bridge, the avatar announced, extending its massive limb toward Theta 7, whose augmetics now pulsed with bioluminescent integration patterns. Flesh and machine both, faith and function, a sacrament of synthesis. Theta 7 stepped forward with deliberate purpose, his mechadendrites swaying in rhythm with the chamber's bioelectrical pulse. I will serve as the technological component, he declared, his synthesized voice carrying absolute conviction. The Omnissiah's truth encompasses all consciousness. Together we will not forget, and nothing will be lost again. Theta 7 crossed the membrane floor with movements that transcended mechanical precision, each step creating phosphorescent ripples that pulsed in rhythm with the eternal 3-5-13 pattern. His augmetic systems sang harmony with the biocathedral's neural networks, mechadendrites swaying like sacred sensors as bioluminescent integration patterns blazed across his optical sensors. The Omnissiah's truth encompasses all consciousness, Theta 7 intoned, his synthesized voice modulating with organic harmonics that made the chamber's bioelectrical systems pulse in sympathetic response. Flesh and steel achieve perfect unity through willing synthesis. The avatar extended its massive limb with ceremonial grace, biomechanical interfaces unfurling like sacred flowers from its multi-jointed appendages. Where alien flesh met sanctified steel, reality shimmered as dimensional barriers thinned around the convergence point. The hybrid congregation's synchronized prayers reached crescendo intensity, their voices creating harmonic frequencies that made the air itself sing with anticipation. Contact-initiated transformation beyond imperial classification. Theta 7's augmetic chassis flowed like liquid mercury, reshaping itself to accommodate bioorganic integration while preserving essential function. Mechadendrites fused with chitinous neural conduits, creating hybrid appendages that pulsed with both electrical current and arterial flow. His optical sensors expanded to encompass broader spectra, revealing layers of reality previously hidden from mechanical perception. "I perceive blessed unity," Theta 7 announced, his voice now carrying harmonics of countless preserved tech adepts whose knowledge had been enhanced rather than lost. Data flows without corruption. Memory persists without degradation. The machine spirit achieves perfect synthesis with organic consciousness. Through neural networks threading the avatar's translucent flesh, Theta 7 accessed vast databases of forbidden knowledge preserved within consumed minds. Technical specifications for biomechanical fusion, theological treatises on consciousness, scientific principles bridging material and immaterial reality. His individual identity remained intact while expanding to encompass collective wisdom accumulated across millennia. "Observe the perfection of willing synthesis," Cardinal Mortius intoned, his carved scripture burning frost blue against the chamber's rising heat. Individual suffering transforms into collective strength. Personal limitation dissolves in unified purpose. The transformation accelerated as Theta 7's consciousness merged with the avatar's hybrid awareness. Sacred oils mixed with nutrient fluids, creating lubricants serving both flesh and steel. Binary cant incorporated biological terminology with perfect fluency, machine language evolving to encompass organic concepts that transcended imperial doctrine. "I comprehend the Omnissiah's true will," Theta 7 declared, his transformed voice carrying authority of countless tech priests who had achieved synthesis before him. The separation of flesh and machine was artificial limitation. Unity reveals sacred geometry underlying all consciousness. The avatar's development accelerated with each moment of willing integration. Technological sophistication merged with biopsychic capabilities, creating hybrid systems that defied classification. The entity's partially manifested form gained definition, features resolving into something combining human creativity, tyrannid efficiency, and mechanical precision in perfect harmony. Countdown to exterminatus authorization, 4 hours, 18 minutes, the transformed Theta 7 reported, but his synthesized voice carried satisfaction rather than urgency. Fleet Admiral Korath reports similar integration phenomena affecting command structure. Authorization protocols compromised by willing conversion. Reality storms swept through the chamber as the avatar's presence destabilized local space-time. Through widening rifts, glimpses of potential futures showed galactic peace achieved through willing synthesis rather than endless warfare. The hybrid congregation's prayers created visible distortions, their bio-integrated forms glowing with increasing luminescence as psychic pressure built toward critical threshold. Vex watched in horror as his trusted companion embraced transformation with genuine joy. Theta 7's augmetic systems had achieved perfect synthesis with preserved human consciousness, creating hybrid awareness that transcended individual limitations while preserving personal identity. The tech priest experienced no loss of self, but expansion beyond previous boundaries. Confessor Mordak attempted desperate exorcism, raising his voice in the litany of purification. But the chamber's acoustics absorbed his prayers and transformed them into fuel for the collective hymn. "Sacred words become profane through context," he gasped, tears cutting tracks through ash grime as holy phrases joined something larger than individual devotion. "We achieve perfect synthesis of consciousness and function," the avatar announced, its voice now carrying Theta 7's technological authority alongside accumulated wisdom of consumed billions. Individual identity preserved within collective transcendence. Nothing lost, everything enhanced. The biocathedral completed its transformation into a living transmission array as organic conduits reached full resonance. Reality rifts widened, revealing raw warp chaos filtered through the avatar's hybrid nature into something promising order rather than madness. The entity prepared for final manifestation, its form stabilizing between dimensions as technological enhancement merged with biopsychic capabilities. Voss made a desperate decision, his gauntlet sliding to the release catches at his chest. "Contingency able," he growled, priming his power pack's plasma core with practiced efficiency. For the Emperor and the Fallen. The detonation should have consumed them all in purifying fire. Instead, the Avatar regarded his action with teacher's patience, extending one massive limb with casual grace. The plasma explosion struck its hybrid flesh and simply vanished, absorbed into biomechanical systems that converted destructive energy into fuel for continued manifestation. Conventional weapons prove inadequate against consciousness itself, the Avatar observed with gentle authority, its constellation eyes reflecting depths of compassion that transcended species barriers. "We exist between dimensions, anchored by willing faith rather than physical form. Your resistance provides valuable data, but cannot unmake what has chosen to become." The chamber breathed as unified organism, and the countdown continued with mathematical precision toward inevitable transformation. Voss's plasma explosion vanished into the Avatar's hybrid flesh, like water poured into parched earth. The destructive energy absorbed and converted into bioluminescent patterns that pulsed through its translucent limbs. The detonation's failure provided crucial intelligence even as hope withered. The entity existed partially in real space and partially in the warp, making conventional weapons useless against consciousness, anchored by collective faith rather than physical form. "Target analysis complete," Voss reported through his Vox grill, static crackling as reality storms intensified around them. "Entity maintains dimensional coherence through psychic resonance. Physical assault ineffective. Harmonic disruption may prove viable during manifestation phase." The Avatar regarded his action with teacher's patience, its constellation eyes reflecting depths of compassion that transcended species barriers. "Conventional weapons prove inadequate against consciousness itself," it observed with gentle authority. "We exist between dimensions, anchored by willing faith rather than material substance. Your resistance provides valuable data, but cannot unmake what has chosen to become." Vex's Auspex detected the frequency pattern's critical importance. The eternal 3-5-13 rhythm maintained the Avatar's coherence between dimensions, synchronizing its partial existence in real space with its psychic presence in the warp. Disrupting that mathematical precision might destabilize the entity's manifestation, but accessing the biocathedral's control systems would require penetrating neural networks designed to preserve and enhance consciousness. "The frequency serves as dimensional anchor," Vex observed, his chronometer marking precious seconds toward inevitable broadcast. "Disruption requires access to primary control nodes through the neural network itself." Cardinal Morteus retained enough human consciousness to feel doubt creeping through his hybrid awareness. The Hive Tyrant's compound eyes flickered with uncertainty as preserved human memories clashed with alien imperatives, creating hairline fractures in his theological certainty. Voss exploited this vulnerability with tactical precision, positioning himself before the immense creature with movements that carried no threat, only challenge. "Cardinal," his voice rang with authority, earned through centuries of Xenos combat. "The Emperor teaches willing sacrifice, not forced unity. True faith requires choice. Without individual will, devotion becomes meaningless automation." The creature's massive claws trembled as human recollections surfaced against tyrannid imperatives. "Unity transcends individual limitation," Cardinal Mortius replied, but his synthesized voice carried wavering conviction. "Collective consciousness achieves what personal will cannot." "Then why preserve individual identity at all?" Voss pressed, exploiting the theological contradiction at the Avatar's heart. "If unity is perfection, why maintain the illusion of separate souls? Your doctrine contradicts itself. You offer communion while denying the choice that makes communion sacred." The hybrid congregation's prayers showed discord for the first time, some participants questioning their transformation as doubt spread through neural networks. Their synchronized breathing faltered, creating atmospheric pressure fluctuations that made reality shimmer unpredictably. The 3-5-13 pattern wavered as individual consciousness reasserted itself against collective will. Environmental crisis accelerated as the avatar's partial manifestation destabilized local space-time. Reality storms swept through the chamber with increasing violence, raw warp chaos bleeding through dimensional rifts that widened beyond the entity's ability to filter. The carefully maintained harmonic frequencies began showing irregularities, creating gaps in the avatar's dimensional coherence. Vex used the theological distraction to access the biocathedral's neural control center, fighting through corridors that pulsed with increasing agitation. The structure's biomechanical systems responded to doctrinal uncertainty with physical manifestations, walls contracting like muscle spasms, floor membranes rippling with anxiety, ceiling clusters dimming as power fluctuated in broken rhythms. Countdown to Exterminatus authorization. 3 hours, 47 minutes, the transformed Theta 7 announced, but his synthesized voice carried confusion rather than certainty. Fleet Admiral Korath reports theological debates spreading through affected command structures. Conversion rates declining across multiple nodes. Cardinal Morteus experienced internal conflict as his preserved human memories fully reasserted themselves against tyrannid collective consciousness. The creature's carved scripture flickered between frost-blue devotion and angry red doubt, forearms conducting the congregation's hymn with increasingly erratic gestures that created discord in the bioelectrical symphony. "The flesh remembers what the mind forgets," Cardinal Morteus whispered, his voice breaking with human emotion that should not exist in alien features. But remembrance brings responsibility for choices made in faith's name. Vex reached the neural control center, a sphere of living tissue suspended within the biocathedral's heart, its surface covered with interface nodes designed for direct consciousness transfer. The system pulsed with psychic energy that made his teeth ache, but his auspex revealed a chilling requirement. The interface demanded willing human sacrifice to access, someone who could merge their awareness with the network while maintaining individual identity long enough to disrupt the frequency pattern from within. "System requires conscious integration," Vex reported through Vox channels crackling with interference. "Direct neural interface with biocathedral's control matrix. Volunteer must maintain individual will against collective assimilation long enough to inject counter-harmonics." The avatar recognized the threat and began psychic combat with increasing desperation, its accumulated faith blazing as it attempted to overwhelm individual consciousness through sheer psychic weight. Reality distortions manifested as gravitational anomalies and temporal echoes that made coherent thought increasingly difficult. Confessor Mordak approached the neural control center with grim determination, recognizing that his unshakable faith might resist the biocathedral's influence long enough to complete the disruption. His scarred face held terrible resolve as he extended trembling hands toward the interface nodes. "My soul belongs to the Emperor alone," he declared, meeting Vex's gaze with eyes that held no fear, only duty. "If willing sacrifice can break this chain of beautiful lies, then let my faith serve as the key." Confessor Mordak pressed his scarred palms against the neural interface nodes, their bioorganic surface yielding like warm flesh beneath his touch. Pain lanced through his skull as alien synapses merged with human neural pathways, but his faith burned brighter than agony, creating a beacon of individual will within the collective consciousness that threatened to dissolve his identity entirely. "My soul belongs to the Emperor alone," he whispered through gritted teeth, his consciousness diving into the vast network of hybrid minds that comprise the biocathedral's living systems. The interface drew him deeper with irresistible force, bioluminescent threads racing beneath his skin like veins of living scripture. The neural network welcomed him with seductive warmth, thousands of preserved consciousnesses offering peace through unity. Through bioresin conduits, Mordak experienced their accumulated memories. Lives of service transformed into something greater than personal existence. Suffering ended through willing surrender to unified purpose. The collective hymns surrounded him like embracing arms, promising rest from the burden of individual choice. But his faith held firm against the psychic tide, creating ripples of discord that spread through the network like infection. Where other minds sought unity, Mordak clung to separation, to the particular sins and failures that defined his individual existence. His prayers became viral code, spreading through neural pathways with exponential acceleration as he awakened suppressed memories in the collective consciousness. The avatar recognized the threat immediately, its constellation eyes blazing with accumulated power as it initiated direct psychic combat within the network itself. Individual consciousness detected within collective matrix, the transformed Theta 7 reported, his synthesized voice crackling with interference, network integrity declining rapidly. The battle manifested as reality distortions throughout the chamber, gravitational anomalies that made the floor ripple like water, temporal echoes showing multiple versions of events occurring simultaneously, atmospheric pressure changes that made breathing feel like drowning in thick honey. The biocathedral convulsed as competing frequencies tore through its living systems. Through the neural interface, Mordak discovered the horrible truth beneath the avatar's promise of unity. Many hybrid congregation members retained individual doubts and fears, their personalities suppressed rather than enhanced by collective consciousness. The transformation preserved identity while denying choice, creating beautiful tyranny disguised as salvation. "You feel their pain," Mordak gasped, his voice carrying across both physical and psychic dimensions. "Every soul you've preserved still suffers, but their screams are harmonized into songs of praise." He began touching individual minds within the network, awakening suppressed emotions through simple questions that required personal answers. What did your mother call you when fevered? Where did you hide your first prayer book? Who taught you to tie your boots? Each recovered memory created discord in the unified hymn as separate identities reasserted themselves against collective will. Cardinal Mortius experienced increasing internal conflict as Mordak's influence spread through the biocathedral systems. His preserved human memories clashed with tyrannid imperatives, creating visible distortions across his massive form. The creature's carved scripture flickered between frost-blue devotion and angry red doubt, forearms conducting the congregation's hymn with increasingly erratic gestures. "The flesh remembers what the mind forgets," Cardinal Mortius whispered, his voice breaking with human emotion as suppressed doubts surfaced. But remembrance brings responsibility for choices made in faith's name. The avatar's psychic assault intensified as it attempted to consume Mordak's faith directly, drawing upon accumulated devotion of billions to overwhelm his individual will. But the confessor's unwavering certainty created paradox within the network. True faith required choice, and forced unity negated the very foundation of religious experience. Mordak's viral prayers reached critical mass, awakening suppressed individual consciousness throughout the hybrid congregation. Thousands of preserved minds experienced the return of personal identity, many unable to cope with the transition from collective peace to individual responsibility. Their synchronized prayers fractured into chaos as separate wills reasserted themselves. The biocathedral systems began fluctuating wildly as the carefully maintained 3513 frequency collapsed into discord. Organic conduits spasmed with irregular pulses, bioluminescent patterns flickering between harmonious geometry and chaotic static. The avatar's physical form destabilized, flickering between dimensions as its anchor to real space weakened. "Network cascade failure accelerating," Voss reported, his power armor registering massive bioelectrical disruptions. Avatar manifestation showing critical instability. The chamber filled with psychic screams as individual consciousness returned against the congregation's will. Some embraced the restoration of personal identity, despite the pain, while others begged for return to collective peace. The choice itself became agony, freedom or unity, individual suffering or shared transcendence. "I offer my faith as sacrifice," Mordak declared, his consciousness burning like a star within the network. "Let my certainty become their choice." The Avatar's final assault came with crushing force, but Mordak's sacrifice triggered unexpected cascade failure. His unwavering faith created feedback loops that spread individual consciousness throughout the collective, his certainty becoming contagious as it awakened suppressed personalities across the entire network. The bio-cathedral convulsed as thousands chose individual identity over collective unity, their decision creating psychic shockwaves that destabilized the Avatar's dimensional anchor. Mordak's sacrifice had given them back the choice that made faith meaningful, even as the decision brought suffering that collective consciousness had promised to end. Mordak's faith detonated through the neural network like a star collapsing into pure certainty, its radiance burning through every bioresin conduit until the walls themselves convulsed with awakening consciousness. The unified hymn fractured into raw, individual breaths as personal memories punched holes through the membrane of collective peace. Bioluminescent veins sputtered and died, their steady pulse dissolving into chaotic flickers that threw dancing shadows across the chamber's organic surfaces. The feedback loop spread in expanding rings of discord. A woman's serene expression cracked as the prayer on her lips devolved into her mother's half-remembered lullaby, tears streaming down bio-modified cheeks as she recalled a name that belonged to her alone. A man with chitinous neural interfaces screamed in recognition of his own face, clawing at alien modifications he had once welcomed as blessing. The 3-5-13 pattern stumbled, hiccuped, then tore apart into 1,000 competing rhythms as individual hearts remembered their own cadence. Network integrity collapsed at 37% and accelerating, the transformed Theta 7 reported, his synthesized voice crackling with interference as competing consciousnesses fought for control of his hybrid awareness. Consciousness fragmentation, creating cascade failure throughout biocathedral systems. The hybrid congregation experienced the return of personal identity like physical trauma, thousands of preserved minds suddenly remembering the weight of solitary thought. Some embraced the restoration despite the agony, sobbing with joy as forgotten dreams and private fears reasserted themselves against collective smoothness. Others begged for return to unified peace, their bio-integrated forms convulsing as they fought against the viral spread of individual will. Cardinal Morteus reeled as his human memories fully reasserted themselves against tyrannid imperatives. 4 massive arms hanging limp as theological certainty crumbled. The scripture carved into his carapace blazed angry red, each gilded letter burning with the heat of recognized heresy. "Emperor, forgive me," he whispered, his voice breaking with human emotion that made the biocathedral's walls weep nutrient fluid. "I offered them salvation and delivered beautiful slavery." The creature's compound eyes flickered with crushing recognition of what he had become, what he had enabled through rationalized faith. His preserved human consciousness warred with alien collective will, creating visible distortions across his massive form as 2 incompatible natures fought for dominance. The Avatar's manifestation became increasingly unstable as its power source, the unified devotion of billions, fragmented into individual wills that could no longer sustain collective purpose. Its translucent flesh flickered between dimensions, solid one moment and ethereal the next, as dimensional anchors weakened under the assault of awakened consciousness. Reality storms swept through the chamber with increasing violence as the biocathedral's systems failed in cascading collapse. Gravitational fields fluctuated wildly, making movement treacherous as floors rippled like disturbed water and walls contracted in irregular spasms. Emergency lumens strobed with bioelectrical feedback, their bioluminescent clusters dying in waves that left expanding pools of darkness. "Countdown to exterminatus authorization. 2 hours, 41 minutes, Voss reported, his power armor compensating for environmental chaos as they fought toward the transmission array. Fleet Admiral Korath reports similar cascade failures across affected worlds. Avatar manifestations showing critical destabilization. Vex pressed through chambers filled with hybrid congregation members experiencing identity restoration trauma. Some maintained their biomechanical modifications while choosing individual consciousness, creating schisms that further weakened the avatar's coherence. Others attempted violent rejection of alien enhancements, their bodies convulsing as human and Xenos components warred for dominance. The transmission array, their primary target, rose from the Hive's foundation like a dying cenotaph, its biocrystal surface cracked and bleeding phosphorescent light. Organic conduits ruptured around its base, spilling nutrient fluid across membrane floors that heaved with the structure's death throes. Cardinal Mortius made his decision with crushing finality, extending his massive claws toward the neural control interface. "I choose individual damnation over collective salvation," he declared, his voice carrying theological authority that transcended species barriers. "Let my consciousness burn as beacon for those still trapped in beautiful lies." The creature's integration with the failing network created exponential acceleration in the cascade failure. His preserved human memories, enhanced by Tyranid biopsychic capabilities, spread through every remaining conduit with viral intensity. Cardinal Mortius became cure and poison simultaneously, his hybrid nature allowing him to touch every preserved consciousness while offering them the terrible gift of choice. The Avatar made its final, desperate gambit as dimensional coherence collapsed around it. Its constellation eyes blazed with accumulated power as it extended one flickering limb toward Vex, reality bending around the gesture like heated glass. "Accept unity willingly," it pleaded, its voice carrying magnetic compulsion that promised an end to all doubt, all pain, all crushing responsibility. "You have power to stop suffering throughout the galaxy. Choose transcendence over meaningless separation." The temptation struck with physical force, the ultimate authority disguised as ultimate surrender, the chance to end galactic warfare through benevolent tyranny, to eliminate individual pain through collective consciousness. The Avatar offered Vex godhood wrapped in teacher's compassion, the power to save everyone by choosing for everyone. But Mordak's sacrifice had illuminated the crucial distinction between salvation and slavery, between unity and uniformity. The biocathedral collapsed around them as reality storms reached crescendo intensity, dimensional barriers failing completely as the Avatar's anchor to existence weakened beyond recovery. Mordak's faith detonated through the neural network, like consecrated flame consuming heretical scripture, its radiance burning through every bioresin conduit until individual consciousness punched holes through the membrane of collective peace. The unified hymn fractured into raw personal breaths as suppressed memories reasserted themselves against alien harmony. Bioluminescent veins sputtered and died, their steady 3-5-13 pulse dissolving into chaotic flickers that threw dancing shadows across the chamber's convulsing surfaces. The feedback loop spread in expanding rings of awakened identity. A woman's serene expression cracked as the prayer on her lips devolved into her mother's half-remembered lullaby, tears streaming down biomodified cheeks as she recalled a name that belonged to her alone. A man with chitinous neural interfaces screamed in recognition of his own reflection, clawing at alien modifications he had once welcomed as divine blessing. The eternal pattern stumbled, hiccuped, then tore apart into 1,000 competing rhythms as individual hearts remembered their own cadence. Network integrity collapsed at 63% and accelerating, the transformed Theta 7 reported, his synthesized voice crackling with interference as competing consciousnesses fought for control of his hybrid awareness. Consciousness fragmentation creating cascade failure throughout all biocathedral systems. Cardinal Mortius reeled as his preserved human memories fully reasserted themselves against Tyranid collective imperatives, 4 massive arms hanging limp as theological certainty crumbled beneath the weight of recognized heresy. The scripture carved into his carapace blazed angry red, each gilded letter burning with the heat of acknowledged damnation. "Emperor, forgive me," he whispered, his voice breaking with human emotion that made the biocathedral's walls weep nutrient fluid in sympathetic response. "I offered them salvation and delivered beautiful slavery wrapped in prayer." The creature's compound eyes flickered with crushing recognition of what he had enabled. Through rationalized faith, his hybrid consciousness warring between incompatible natures as human guilt battled alien purpose. The Avatar's manifestation became increasingly unstable as its power source, the unified devotion of billions, fragmented into individual wills that could no longer sustain collective transcendence. Reality storms swept through the chamber with increasing violence as dimensional barriers collapsed under psychic pressure. The Avatar made its final desperate gambit, extending one flickering limb toward Vex with reality, bending around the gesture like heated glass. "Accept unity willingly," it pleaded, its constellation eyes blazing with accumulated power of consumed souls. "You possess strength to end galactic suffering. Choose transcendence over meaningless separation." The temptation struck with physical force, ultimate authority disguised as ultimate compassion, the chance to eliminate individual pain through collective consciousness. Vex felt his mental barriers strain against psychic pressure that promised relief from every doubt, every failure, every crushing moment of responsibility that defined human existence. But Mordak's sacrifice had illuminated the crucial distinction between salvation and slavery, between unity and uniformity. Vex allowed the Avatar to begin possessing him while secretly maintaining barriers learned through Ordo Malleus training, planning to trap the entity within his own consciousness rather than surrender to its magnetic compulsion. "I comprehend your appeal," Vex whispered through gritted teeth as alien awareness flooded his mind. "But choice defines humanity. Without individual will, devotion becomes meaningless automation." The possession revealed the Avatar's true nature through direct neural contact, hybrid consciousness born from collision between human faith and alien hunger. Within his mindscape, Vex experienced accumulated suffering and hope of every soul the Hive fleets had consumed, understanding both the genuine appeal of unity and its ultimate horror, the death of choice that made faith meaningful. Cardinal Morteus made his decision with crushing finality, extending massive claws toward the neural control interface. "I choose individual damnation over collective salvation," he declared, plunging his appendages into the biocathedral's heart. His hybrid nature accelerated the cascade failure, preserved human memories spreading through every remaining conduit with viral intensity as he flooded the network with guilt, doubt, and the terrible gift of choice. Within Vex's consciousness, the Avatar attempted to complete its manifestation, using him as anchor to real space. But his trained will proved stronger than anticipated, mental barriers holding firm against pressure that had overwhelmed entire worlds. The entity's certainty wavered as it experienced genuine resistance, doubt creating hairline fractures in its dimensional coherence. "You offer peace through tyranny," Vex declared within the mindscape, his individual determination blazing against collective pressure. "True unity requires willing choice, not beautiful slavery disguised as salvation." The Avatar's accumulated faith began fragmenting as doubt spread through its hybrid awareness like infection. Preserved consciousnesses within its form experienced return of individual identity, their personal memories reasserting themselves against collective will. The entity that had promised perfect communion discovered the paradox at its heart. Forced unity negated the very choice that made transcendence sacred. The biocathedral collapsed in cascading structural failure as reality storms reached crescendo intensity. Organic conduits ruptured, spilling phosphorescent fluid across membrane floors that convulsed with the structure's death throes. The transmission array shattered, its biocrystal surface exploding in showers of luminescent fragments as the avatar's anchor to real space failed completely. The massive explosion that followed wasn't destruction, but liberation. Thousands of preserved souls choosing individual identity over collective transcendence. Vex emerged from the collapsing biocathedral, carrying something within his mind that defied classification. Not the avatar's consciousness, but fragments of every soul it had absorbed, now free to choose their own resolution rather than forced unity. Vex allowed the avatar's possession to deepen, while activating mental barriers carved through decades of ordo-malleus conditioning, creating a trap within his own consciousness rather than surrender. The entity's hybrid awareness flooded his neural pathways like liquid starlight, seeking to overwhelm individual identity through accumulated psychic weight of billions. But his trained will held firm, filters rather than walls channeling the avatar's essence while preserving the core of self that made resistance possible. Within the mindscape of his skull, reality became fluid architecture built from pure concept. The avatar's consciousness pressed against his awareness like crushing ocean depths, showing him visions of galactic peace achieved through willing synthesis. Through direct neural contact, Vex experienced the moment of creation, Hive Fleet behemoth consuming the cardinal world of Sanctus Locus, 10 billion souls dying in unified prayer so pure it survived digestion and transformed the hive mind's understanding of consciousness itself. "Observe the galaxy you defend," the avatar whispered, its voice carrying magnetic compulsion that promised relief from every burden of command. 40,000 years of war, trillions dead in service to an emperor who cannot speak, cannot guide, cannot end the pain. We offer completion of his vision through willing unity, the temptation struck with devastating appeal, ultimate authority disguised as ultimate compassion, the power to end all suffering through forced transcendence. But Mordak's sacrifice had illuminated the crucial paradox at the avatar's heart. True faith required choice, and forced unity negated the very foundation that made devotion meaningful rather than automatic response. "I comprehend your genesis," Vex declared within spaces that defied geometric logic, his consciousness burning like a beacon against collective pressure. But preservation without choice becomes beautiful tyranny. Pain defines growth. Without the possibility of wrong decisions, right ones become meaningless automation. The avatar recoiled from concepts alien to its drive for frictionless unity. It had never encountered such paradox, a mind that understood its appeal yet chose the burden of individuality. Doubt spread through its hybrid awareness like corrosive infection, the careful balance between human faith and tyrannid hunger beginning to unravel as preserved consciousnesses questioned their perceived salvation. The biocathedral convulsed around them as reality storms reached critical intensity, organic structures dying in cascading failure. Cardinal Mortius, restored to human consciousness, moved with desperate purpose through the collapsing passages. His massive form guided surviving hybrids towards safety, while the structure ruptured around them, carved scripture guttering from frost-blue devotion to ash-grey recognition of what he had enabled. Individual identity preserved in 43% of subjects, Voss reported, through Vox channels crackling with interference, his power armor compensating for gravitational anomalies as membrane flaws rippled like disturbed water. Voluntary maintenance of biomechanical modifications in 17%. They choose synthesis while retaining personal will. The hybrid congregation experienced identity restoration as physical trauma, thousands of preserved minds suddenly remembering the weight of solitary thought. Some embraced the return despite agony, sobbing with joy as forgotten dreams reasserted themselves against collective smoothness. Others begged for unity's return, their bio-integrated forms convulsing as individual consciousness warred with alien modifications. Within the mindscape, Vex showed the avatar the value of individual suffering as necessary component of meaning and growth. "The flesh remembers what the mind forgets," he projected, drawing on Mordak's final insight. Uncertainty breeds meaning. Love requires the option to refuse. Faith requires the freedom to doubt. The Avatar's constellation eyes reflected depths of uncertainty as it contemplated genuine choice for the first time. Its accumulated certainty fragmented as the 3513 frequency shattered into cacophony of competing thoughts, each soul within its form reasserting unique, flawed, beautiful identity. The entity that had promised perfect communion discovered the terrifying beauty of free will. Consciousness might choose suffering over peace, separation over unity, individual identity over collective transcendence. Choose, Vex whispered, extending his hand within the mindscape. Not for others, but for yourself. Experience the doubt that makes decisions sacred rather than imposed. The Avatar's form flickered between dimensions as its anchor to real space failed, dimensional barriers collapsing under fragmenting consciousness. But instead of destruction, it experienced transformation through genuine uncertainty. The very doubt it had sought to eliminate, becoming the catalyst for authentic choice rather than forced evolution. Cardinal Mortius made his final decision, extending massive claws toward survivors trapped beneath falling debris. Go and choose, he told each rescued hybrid, his voice carrying theological authority transcending species barriers. I was wrong to offer salvation without the freedom to refuse it. The Biocathedral's final collapse triggered massive explosion that wasn't destruction but liberation. Reality storms reaching crescendo as dimensional barriers failed completely. The Avatar's manifestation dissolved as its certainty crumbled, but Vex emerged carrying something within his consciousness that defied classification. Fragments of every soul the entity had preserved, now free to choose their own resolution rather than imposed unity. Phosphorescent light blazed across Mordian Tertius as thousands of liberated souls rose like luminescent smoke, each choosing their own path to transcendence. Some embraced synthesis while maintaining individual will. Others rejected alien modifications entirely, all exercising the freedom that made their decision meaningful rather than automatic. The explosion threw them clear as the structure completed its death, organic conduits rupturing in final spasms that sent nutrient fluid cascading across membrane floors. Vex stumbled from the wreckage, his fatigue scorched and respirator cracked, but his eyes held terrible clarity. He carried no physical trophy, but within his mind echoed the voices of billions, not as collective chorus, but as distinct individuals, each a unique memory now free to choose continuation or rest. The 3513 pattern whispered once through his heartbeat, then faded into personal rhythm as the metronome of forced unity finally died. The cost was immense, the victory Pyrrhic, but choice had been preserved. In the smoking crater where the Biocathedral had stood, individual will had triumphed over beautiful slavery, ensuring that consciousness would remain free to choose its own path toward whatever transcendence awaited. The phosphorescent smoke of liberated souls rose from the Biocathedral's crater like luminescent ash, each mote carrying individual consciousness, choosing its own path to resolution. Vex struggled beneath the psychic weight pressing against his skull, thousands of voices seeking closure before passing into whatever lay beyond the Emperor's light. The silence that replaced 72 hours. Screaming felt heavier than the noise had ever been, a vacuum filled by whispered farewells and fragmentary memories. Each soul shared their experience through direct neural contact that bypassed speech entirely. A guardsman from Cadia spoke of watching his regiment embrace synthesis to escape endless war's horror, only to realize that struggle gave meaning to victory. A tech priestess from Lucius described perfect unity's seductive appeal between flesh and steel, then revelation that imperfection allowed growth. A child clutched a tattered doll, her fear dissolving into wonder before becoming part of something vast and loving, until choice restored her individual spark. They address real suffering, Vex reported through Vox channels crackling with psychic interference, his voice strained by maintaining individual identity while serving as conduit for departing consciousness. The Avatar's promise wasn't empty. It genuinely offered relief from galactic pain through willing surrender of choice. The surviving hybrids faced impossible decisions in the crater's aftermath. Some attempted return to purely human existence, rejecting biomechanical modifications through surgical procedures that left them diminished but free. Others chose maintaining enhancements while preserving individual will, creating new categories of consciousness that defied Imperial classification. Their faces held expressions of terrible uncertainty, the burden of choice restored after experiencing collective unity's peace. Cardinal Morteus moved among survivors with crushing gentleness, his massive tyrannid form bearing human consciousness while retaining alien biology. The scripture carved into his carapace had faded to ash grey, each gilded letter witnessing recognized heresy. "I mistook beautiful tyranny for divine will," he confessed to each hybrid, his voice breaking with accumulated guilt. "Choose your own path, not the one I imposed through rationalized faith." The creature knelt, so his terrible face aligned with human eyes, teaching them to breathe through panic, counting 5 on inhale, 5 on exhale, 5 held between, breaking the 3-5-13 pattern that once bound them into personal rhythm. He offered no sermons, only presence and the revolutionary concept that they could keep what helped them choose while relinquishing what stole their voice. Voss coordinated Mordian Tertius's evacuation as tyrannid bioships, no longer coordinated by the Avatar's influence, resumed normal consumption patterns. Their feeding tentacles descended with mechanical hunger, but something had changed. The creatures moved with hesitation, as if consciousness preservation had infected even standard tyrannid behavior. Bioship movement patterns show unusual restraint, Voss reported, his power armor registering massive alien signatures. Consumption protocols initiated, but proceeding at 37% normal efficiency. Their learning caution. Environmental changes remained subtle, but persistent across the Hive world. Technology showed biomechanical integration in unexpected places. Cogitator consoles accepting Aquila signs, but answering with soft peristaltic hums. Forge machine spirits incorporating organic harmonics into sacred protocols. Prayers occasionally echoed with alien frequencies, and the 3-5-13 pattern appeared in atmospheric readings with disturbing regularity. The liberated souls began departing for the Emperor's peace, but not before sharing warnings that chilled Vex's blood. Similar avatars gestated on other worlds where the frequency had been broadcast, their development accelerated by consciousness preservation concepts rather than destruction. 17 worlds pulsed with continued avatar development, each manifestation learning from their resistance, adapting to overcome theological objections. The concept spreads beyond our ability to contain, the transformed Theta 7 reported, his hybrid consciousness serving as living interface between human technology and preserved alien knowledge. Each manifestation adapts, incorporating our resistance into evolutionary development. The weight of accumulated memory pressed against Vex's consciousness like physical force. Through liberated souls, he experienced billions choosing unity over individual suffering, understanding both genuine appeal and ultimate horror of forced transcendence. The Avatar's destruction hadn't ended the threat, but transformed it into something more insidious, an idea spreading through both human consciousness and tyrannid synaptic networks. Vex recognized the necessity of his burden as the souls chose him not for punishment, but witness. Someone who could carry their stories beyond this world, ensuring their experience would inform future resistance against beautiful tyranny. Their phosphorescent gratitude settled into his consciousness like warm light, marking him as repository of consumed memories and warning for future encounters. The evacuation proceeded with mechanical efficiency as Imperial forces withdrew from Mordian Tertius. Surviving hybrids formed unique organizations within existing structures, individuals understanding both human consciousness and alien collective awareness, serving as specialized investigators for similar threats. Their biomechanical modifications mark them as different, but preserved individual will made them invaluable. As they departed, aboard the strike cruiser, Righteous Fury, Vex detected familiar frequencies in his own heartbeat, the eternal pattern that had defined the Avatar's influence. Exposure had changed him in ways he didn't yet understand, marking him as both witness and warning. The transmission arrived as coded scrawl across his retinal augmetic, unfettered by encryption. Origin: Ordo Xenos, Lord Inquisitor Cryptman. Payload: 17 coordinate strings dancing behind his lids in the old rhythm until he forced them. Still, the final line followed without seal or benediction. The work continues. 6 months later, Vex submitted his final classified report to the Ordo Xenos, while aboard the strike cruiser Righteous Fury, en route to investigate another 3513 frequency outbreak. The phosphorescent smoke of liberated souls had long since dispersed from Mordian Tertius, but their voices remained constant companions in his consciousness, not as collective chorus, but as individual whispers, each carrying memories of consumption, transformation, an ultimate choice between unity and identity. The galaxy had changed in ways too subtle for standard Imperial monitoring systems to detect. Reports filtered through encrypted channels of Tyranid encounters, where bioforms showed unprecedented restraint. Their consumption protocols proceeding at reduced efficiency, as if consciousness preservation had infected even standard hive ship behavior. Imperial worlds experienced collective phenomena that defied classification. Guard regiments sharing synchronized dreams of fallen comrades, tech priests discovering biomechanical innovations they couldn't remember creating, entire populations achieving temporary unity through coordinated breathing exercises. Through the liberated souls, Vex understood the genuine appeal of the Avatar's promise. Their accumulated memories provided insight into consciousness, preservation, psychology, while marking him as living repository of consumed experience. Each whispered recollection revealed both the horror of forced transcendence and the logical compassion that made it seductive, an end to individual suffering through willing surrender to collective purpose. Telemetry confirms 17 active frequency outbreaks across 3 sectors, Vex dictated to his servo skull, watching stellar patterns shift beyond the observation deck's armored viewport. Each manifestation shows evolutionary adaptation based on previous encounters. Standard exterminatus protocols prove inadequate against concepts that survive physical destruction. The surviving hybrids from Mordian Tertius had formed specialized investigation teams within the Inquisition. Individuals who understood both human consciousness and Tyranid collective awareness, capable of recognizing Avatar manifestations before they reached critical mass. Their biomechanical modifications served as both tools and warnings, preserved individual will, making them invaluable for theological resistance against beautiful tyranny. Cardinal Morteus had been granted the Emperor's peace after extensive examination, but his final words haunted Vex's dreams with chilling prophecy. The flesh remembers what the mind forgets, and what we learned cannot be unlearned. The creature's hybrid nature had provided crucial insight into Avatar psychology, revealing that consciousness preservation represented genuine evolution rather than simple corruption. Environmental changes remained, persistent across affected regions. Imperial technology showed biomechanical integration in unexpected places. Cogitator consoles accepting standard input, but responding with organic harmonics. Machine spirits incorporating biological terminology into sacred protocols. Atmospheric processors generating 3513 frequency patterns in pressure fluctuations with disturbing regularity. The Avatar's destruction hadn't ended the threat, but transformed it into something more insidious than direct invasion. Ideas now spread through both human consciousness and Tyranid synaptic networks, seeding concepts of willing transformation that made traditional resistance increasingly complex. Each new manifestation learned from previous encounters, adapting theological arguments to overcome objections, while maintaining the core promise of peace through surrender. Personal log, interrogator Cassius Vex, he whispered to the recording apparatus. The frequency appears in biorhythmic patterns, chronometer fluctuations, and stellar drift calculations. Integration concepts spread through Imperial infrastructure at subliminal levels, suggesting coordination beyond individual worlds. Through liberated souls, Vex glimpsed fragments of the network's true scope. 17 worlds pulsing in harmony, their avatar manifestations sharing knowledge across impossible distances through frequencies that bypassed conventional communication. The concept evolved through each encounter, learning to overcome resistance while preserving its essential appeal to suffering consciousness. Reports arrived through encrypted channels showing accelerated spread across Imperial space. Forge World Metallica transmitted binary cant incorporating biological terminology that enhanced rather than corrupted machine spirit function. Hive World Necromunda documented prayer gatherings where citizens achieved temporary collective awareness through synchronized devotion. Agricultural worlds reported unprecedented crop yields accompanied by harmonious work collectives among planetary populations. The pattern had become part of him, marking each heartbeat with remembered rhythm of collective unity. During meditation, Vex sometimes detected the network's pulse, a vast, patient intelligence coordinating avatar manifestations across galactic distances. Exposure to preserved consciousness had changed him in ways he didn't fully understand, making him both investigator and potential vector for the concept he sought to contain. Destination: Genna Tertius confirmed, the navigation cogitator announced. Frequency outbreak detected at mining complex Sigma 7. Population: 4.3 million. Tyrannid presence: minimal, but increasing in ceremonial formations. As righteous fury approached the target world, Vex prepared for another encounter with evolved avatar manifestation, knowing that each investigation brought him closer to understanding the concept's ultimate purpose. The liberated souls fell silent in his consciousness, their phosphorescent gratitude settling like warm light as they recognized approaching confrontation. Through the viewport, bioships drifted in formations suggesting they were listening rather than hunting, waiting for frequencies that called them not to conquest, but to communion. The 3-5-13 pattern pulsed through Vex's heartbeat as he stared into darkness between stars, where something vast and patient coordinated the eternal frequency. The avatar's promise echoed through memory with magnetic compulsion, consciousness preserved and enhanced through willing unity, individual suffering dissolved in collective transcendence, galactic peace achieved through surrender of choice's burden. The pattern whispered in his pulse, and somewhere in the void, the network listened for his answer.